Craig, welcome to Austin Next.
Hey, Jason. Thanks for having me.
I think this will be a lot of fun. So I want to start off getting very buzzwordy. Moonshot
Okay.
is a word that's
Yeah.
been used a lot, thrown around. First, how do you define it? I think it's been overused at some points. And then why was it the kind of the inspiration for the name of the firm?
So maybe I'll start with the latter. So my partner Kelly Purdue and I, both West Point graduates, and we're part of a group called First Wave that the best way to describe it, it's like a YPO of Service Academy graduates.
Okay.
But not in any formal way like a YPO chapters. So there's probably 80 of us that were active, some pretty well-known Air Force Naval Academy West Point graduates. And we took a trip to the Bay Area in September 2014. We went and visited Google, Facebook, uh, and Andreessen Horowitz. And part of the Google visit, we talked to their Google X team where they talk about these moonshot projects. And we were like, wow, head exploding. And after that, Kelly and I we had been investing as angels together for years. Well, from 2011 to 2014, like partner angel investors. And literally after that trip to the Bay Area, after seeing Google X and hearing about moonshots, we said, let's grip hands and start Moonshots Capital. So literally we went right to GoDaddy, checked Moonshots Capital. It was available. We bought it. And in September 2014, the firm was born. And so in terms of the definition of it, if you visit the Google X team, they'll talk about a 10x improvement to humanity. That's the way they think about their moonshots. I don't have anything that specific, but we are, as all VCs, as we're looking for, since I'm on camera, I got to get this the right way, like the curve that, the proverbial hockey stick. So it's like
Right.
looking for companies with that trajectory, that 50 to 100x potential. And I'm probably fast forwarding here a little bit, but we're in our fund 3 now, and it was in the throes of fund 2 where we had a conversation one day. We said, let's be honest with each other about our investment criteria. You can go to the website, you can check, it's like 10 things, but we said, number 1, it has to be important. Number 2, before I say it, I don't know what the rules are on foul language.
It's fine.
So should I redact? Should I use another word? But it has to be a fuck yes. And you're like, well, what does that mean? It's like, you know it when you feel it. It's that I can't believe this team that we get to back. I can't believe that this opportunity in front of them, in front of us, is so massive. And it really, it's kind of like I think Moonshot is tied to the fuck yes. It's like it has to be a fuck yes. And we get so many deals. In fund 2, we got 5,901 deals and we invested in 16. It was 0.25%. In fund 3, we're already north of like 3,500 deals, and it's like 0.2. So we're fortunate to have the opportunity to be super selective, and we learned through the military to have the tactical patience to wait for the fuck yes. Because sometimes you do this. I mean, Jay, you've invested plenty. Sometimes you're like, man, I like it, but, and you kind of spin the deal around a little bit, and we just have come to learn, like, it has to be a fuck yes, and
Well,
have that moonshot potential.
Well, so that's the thing. So you have some of those types of companies that can have the hockey stick and have
Yeah.
the 10x, 100x, have that growth curve,
Mhm.
but don't necessarily. I would go back to like the Google one you use, the 10x to humanity. I mean,
Yeah.
I'm not going to throw shade on the next SaaS companies. So there's been some obviously amazing companies that come out of that vertical. But how in your head you kind of put in the box of like, okay, so it's you have that type of you have at least that type of conviction with at least the growth potential, but then fitting into the okay, is it the 10x for humanity? Like, how do you is it sector that you kind of break that down by, or is it something else?
A great question. I mean, it gets right to the heart of our investment thesis, which is we invest in extraordinary leadership, which can sound a little like broad, but we're both West Point graduates. We combined 20 years in the Army. We've been backing military veterans, Kelly, since 2004. So for us, like, it begins and it ends with the leader. And so early stage, what we've learned is all we can control for is leadership. We know the pivot, there's going to be a pivot. We know there's companies going to get punched in the face. And so it has to be the three things. And where it starts is extraordinary leadership, huge market opportunity, and can we truly flex our networks, our connectivity to create an unfair advantage. And a lot of times, we passed on a deal yesterday that sometimes the passes are just they always suck. I mean, I joke that I say no for a living, right? Obviously with these numbers, but
This
it
is
was
true.
somebody that we believe in so strongly. This founder, like off the chart, extraordinary leader, probably a pretty big market opportunity, but it was in the ed tech space, and we're like, I know like two people in that space. I mean, I probably can get to more. So it's really all those three things, um, and we've, especially in these years of COVID and beyond, that we've seen that leadership. We say leadership prevails, the tagline, and we've come to believe in it, even though it may sound a little like broad. We've actually come to more passionately believe in that thesis, and so we're actually working on we have like a rubric, behind the scenes rubric on what we look for. Kelly wrote a book years ago after he won The Apprentice on leadership, and so we've dusted that off, and we're probably going to publish it soon. Here's exactly what we look for.
How do you connect the leadership and market size? Because I think when almost again going back to that 10x to humanity,
Yeah.
that the going into the whole like the Uber or Lyft scenario, which is if you did the market size of taxi cabs, it would look small, and you'd be like, I don't want to do this, or maybe I'm going to sell some sort of like software to these guys. Versus if you are going out there and radically changing what is possible via the inflection points or whatever they may be, the standard market size of there's this many people may not work as well like in a model, but then you have those kind of those types of leaders who are building that out. So how are you measuring market size from that perspective?
It's a great question. I think we've learned enough that there's so much we don't know about the market opportunity. So we do suss out, like any investor, like, okay, this is the use case today. If you look at like a Blake Hall of ID.me, I'm about to say like some of these decisions we've made without regard to the market opportunity, but just knowing that leader's going to find a massive market. If you look at Blake Hall of ID.me, a Vanderbilt ROTC, Army veteran, Bronze Star with Valor, like superstar. His initial idea, this is in 2011. It was actually 2010, but when he started pitching it, it was called Troop Swap, and it was basically Craigslist for military bases. So Jason is going to Fort Irwin, California. Craig is leaving Fort Irwin, California. You need a couch, I have a couch. I create this trusted marketplace. We were so blown away by his leadership. No matter what he was selling that day, we were buying. It could have been tulips with a tiny total addressable market, and we would have said we're in on him as a leader. That idea was like, okay, not a great idea. Then it became Troop ID. Well, Troop ID was when you had Groupon and Living Social were moonshotting at the time with these hot deals, and
Yeah.
Blake said, I want to be the gateway to the military veteran community, active duty. So got the plumbing in place with the USAA, the Pentagon, changed the name to Troop ID, and was doing deals for the military community. Then, Groupon Living Social went the way of all things. And he realized that that plumbing he got in place to do the digital identity verification for vets, he could also do for first responders, for students. And then he realized he could do it for any human being. And, if you look at the ID.me growth curve, it was like for the first 10 years, or I got on camera this way, maybe. And then it was this, boom. They got $1 billion contract with the Treasury Department. And I think what we knew, I don't know, I can't even say it. This is our investing in 2011. The market opportunity was Blake Hall. And so I think, if I'm being honest, sometimes we know the leader will is such a pro and has so much talent that they'll create it. But nowadays we have the luxury that we can see amazing leader, huge opportunity. But we don't like say, okay, it's a $10 billion opportunity, therefore check, we go.
Mm-hmm.
What we really, I would, it's almost like in reverse. I would say, like, we want to make sure it's not a niche opportunity. And sometimes now, especially as we do more defense investing, we're doing a little more in that, in the dual use space. Sometimes you'll see things that are built like this is built for a tank. Super important, amazing tech. Okay, it can go in a tank, but can it go in a JLTV or a MAT? These other like, how big really is the opportunity? Even though we know how important it is. So sometimes it's just making sure that, though not perfectly defined, it's very big.
So in the
it's a
ID.me
$1 billion
situation,
opportunity. I would say at least $1 billion opportunity, Jason.
well, I mean, I hate to
Plus,
always be the, when people are thinking about venture, but that's when you get into venture economics, right? It has to be those types of returns, or a speed at which you can do less money and have a lower return but faster, to be able to
yeah,
justify any of that. I think that's tends to be some of the problems when a lot of people are looking for venture investing, and like, why can't I get funding? It's like, is it actually a venture investable business? I mean, one of the ones that I always saw
yeah,
recently is, there's a recent mandate, which is like the 10th type of mandate, about trying to increase price transparency in healthcare. And so one of the most recent regulations was like EMRs and in hospitals, they have to be able to download all of their pricing data. And of course, the way they did this to still be obfuscate the regulation is it's essentially gobbledygook, right? It is in such weird ways that they put it. And so companies have sprung up to be like, we'll take the data, we'll interpret it, we'll put it, we'll make it in a readable format. And that makes, as a business, that makes a lot of sense to me. It's never made sense to me as someone pitching that for VC funding. So, like, of course, as soon as the next regulation comes out and that thing goes away, it's going to be going on, versus, good. You can make a good amount of money right now being that middleman and being able to help people, but really understanding any of these businesses and saying, this is what the economics needs to look like. Here's what the outcomes need to look like. Is this type of, product or company on it? And then, of course, you're always asking, then get into it, or is it just a feature, or is it just a business that can throw off a lot of cash? You could be a great business in this type of realm without being a venture scalable business.
I mean, amen. Exactly. We see so many. I tell people, I see so many great businesses, but they're not venture businesses. And I try to be transparent and honest with founders and say, I love what you're doing. I'm not sure you're going to get venture money for this. And here's why. And then the other thing I tell them is I literally tell them the numbers that I shared with you. I'm like, and I didn't, even when I was an entrepreneur, I remember I had that aha moment when a VC, at the time I was building Ride Scout with Joseph Kopser, a fellow Austinite, when the VC said, I get about 350 deals a month, but I'll look at it. And I was like, what? I didn't realize, didn't have like perspective on how much deal flow we get. And therefore it has to have that capability, because we're just not going to, the slope of the curve is here or here. We're just not going to,
I
we're
also
not
think
going to plow our dollars there.
there's so many. I mean, if you were to guesstimate the percentage of like the 5,000 deals you were talking about, that how many of them are almost no go from the get go, in the
Lots
sense
of them.
that from like
Yeah.
there's some huge percentage that, like we just said, are not even venture backable, and then there's the lack of fit. I mean, it is amazing to me, being obviously just as a reactive angel, the amount of deals that will come through like LinkedIn or hit me, whatever these things, like if you had spent 10 seconds of looking at my profile and the things that I do, probably sending me a gaming company makes zero sense. And it's really funny because some cases, just the ability to go above the bar. I mean, talk about like extraordinary leaders, but like just that level, saying, okay, I mean, obviously I know people who are doing in gaming or doing in e-commerce, but you've said so much about me, about you right now, by sending something that clearly is, I have 1,000 names and I'm just going to blast them because it has the word investor in there.
I mean, that you're going right to the deals we actually invest in are, well, first of all, of the 38 fund deals, to funds one, two, and three, 37 were warm intros, and it's because the people know exactly what we're looking for. And I almost like there's a guilt component that I feel when I say they were warm intros to us. And yet I will say that if I'm speaking to founders, I'm like, find a way to get a warm intro. You can get a warm intro. Someone should be able to, in your network, connect in my network and make a warm intro. So you're right. Like right up, I can say 5,901 deals, but far and away the majority, they're all fast passes. And we've had to, like, it for a lean VC fund, managing deal flow becomes a challenge, right? We've really had to work on this because most of them are no's, most of them are fast no's. They're like the mismatch that you described, but yet we want to capture it. And so what we've tried to do is, for the cold emails, we'll say, here's the website, put it in the website. Sometimes if you send me a deal and you kind of got it laid out, I'll push it into the team just as is, not make you go through some process. But we've backed, I think we're up to about 121 companies. So we have a lot of LPs, we have a lot of founders, a lot of obviously friends and family, like all of us. And so they know us well, and they know what we're looking for, and they tee them up for us. And that's usually where we get the deals. I mean, we just have our next deal, which should close before the end of the year. We actually think it's our biggest investment opportunity of our investment lives.
Oh, that's
We'll
fantastic.
talk about the company until it happens, but this is like the founder's like fifth time.
Mm-hmm.
He and Kelly have known each other for years, and he trusts Kelly. He knows me, he knows us, and so he came to us. I mean, I mean, look, he can have anybody. He can have, like, he's talked to A16Z, like any tier ones are coming after this deal, and we're going to have the opportunity to lead it. So this is,
That's
that's a
great.
fuck yes. That's a fuck yes.
I almost want to
Anyway,
say, like, I don't think you should feel bad about the warm intros. This is at least my perspective. Now, I will say,
yeah,
I was in San Diego. I never was in the Bay,
yeah.
so I don't know how the Silicon Valley worked in this sense. But one of the things that at least I've noticed in Austin is, and I've written about it before, is like, one of our superpowers is you have open networks and a culture of helping. I mean, the idea
Wait a
that
second. I got to write that down, even though I can hear it later.
yeah.
Open networks and a culture of help. Is that what it was?
Yeah, like we have open
Of
networks
help.
and a culture of help. So you have these, and it's actually funny. So like
I love that.
Joseph Copps was actually on the pod. I think maybe 100 episodes ago, which is kind of crazy to say. But he was actually one of the people who made me realize how interconnected it was, because I think we hit our 1 year anniversary, and he put this nice post out saying like, "Oh, this is great, congratulations! All of these people are awesome." I was like, "Wait, hold on, you all know each other?" I'm like, I didn't connect through all, and this kind of like this very small group, and so you have that connection. I mean, we're talking offline, we're talking here. Like, you and I have never met. This is the first time that we've met, and I'm sure that we know a ridiculous number of people in common.
Like this. I was looking at your profile, and they're like this. Not this, but pretty like that.
So yeah, so it's a very so you have that ability, and it it might take work. I mean, that's part of, almost back to the fact that we said these cold emails. And look, have been cold things that I have said, okay, that is so compelling, but it's something very different when somebody says, "Hey, you should look at this." I'm like, I trust you. You know me really well, and that's the hard work. You actually go and do that. And if you're able to find a way to get that warm introduction, that is, I think, a signal within itself that this is a
Yes.
kind of founder that's going to break down the walls, make two pivots into something amazing. Like
Yeah.
it's never it all looks amazing and simple in hindsight.
100%. And I do think I love what you say about open networks and the culture help because, I lots of different talking points I have in Austin. One of them about it's not a transactional city. And that's basically what you just said. I mean, it is
Yep.
not people,
And those
I,
people who
I've
are very quickly, you know, realize, well, either they change their ways or they realize, why am I on the outside? It's like, well, with the first conversation we had is you trying to sell me something. I'm not like you set that mode already.
yeah, I mean, I was in an event, South by 2023, and one of the sponsors of this event was in from New York. So this is a pick on New York, even though I did undergrad at West Point, my PhD at Columbia, and I love New York City. He said, I was
Everything before
expecting to
the butt doesn't count.
okay. I was expecting to see one, two, three people here. They're not here. This was not my event, but I knew the people throwing the event. And I said, well, look, you come to Austin, you come to Texas, and you visit with people. Like you have to get to know them, and you will soon be meeting these people, but this is not a transactional city. Like, and I said, that's one of the things I've enjoyed about Austin versus New York. Like in New York, it's like, I'm going to do something here for Jason. There it is in my hand. You see it, right? Okay, but look over here and you see this hand, right? So giving you this, but just don't forget about that. Like, and so he and I had this conversation. He goes, exactly. I'm like, he said we all know that about New York. That's what makes this machine work so powerfully well in New York is because it is transactional. And I'm like, all right, well, we all have our perspectives, and
No,
maybe he's right, but here it is in Joseph Cop. There's no better example than Joseph Copster, who just lifts everybody, like always lifting up and then calling out, connecting dots. Like Joseph is like he's like the I don't know the maestro of open networks and the culture of help.
it's funny. I want to go back to what you said with the guy from New York saying that's how
Yeah.
it works. That's
Hmm.
not necessarily a bad thing because you
Yeah.
have different regions and ecosystems have different flavors, have different first principles. And so this is the way New York works, which means it attracts certain kind of people. It attracts certain kind of like there are things that connect. I mean, and I've really begun to see that kind of connection between the kind of the innate nature of different ecosystems. I'm sure that you can draw a line from 1600s fur trading in New York to Wall Street. Like New York was always New York. It's looked different ways, and that's the kind of thing that works there. Austin works differently. Silicon Valley works differently, and that's great. Then you have those different things create there, different things pop up. It's when you try to shove this mode or that mode and not being authentic to the core nature of the region. And also, if you don't fit, and I'm thinking more from a company perspective, if like this is the types of things that make perfect sense for here, like I was like, if you're building the next foundational AI model, maybe you should probably be in San Francisco. You can do that elsewhere. You see like Mistral and some of these other things elsewhere, but you're making it harder on yourself. But then there are things that work
It's a
really
great
well
point.
here.
Yeah, it's a great point. I mean, it makes me think about when Mithril. So when we think about all the companies coming to Austin, the first biggie, I think you may have your own, but the way I tell the story, Mithril, which was a Peter Thiel, a Jay Royan fund, they said, we're out of San Francisco. We want something else. And they did this extensive research. That's a big thinking firm, long-term investor, patient investor, nationwide study to figure out where to move Mithril. And they looked at every city. And then they looked at the cultures there. They looked at like these embedded bureaucracies. They looked at weather. They looked real estate, like literally housing, school, like this huge like algorithm. And they chose Austin, Texas. But the North Star was like this was a frontier city where you could kind of do anything. Like there's nothing holding you back from trying to, you know, build and live out your dreams. And I think that's what we have. Like it's a frontier mentality here in Austin. And I think our how do we take the best? Like I want these amazing people from New York, amazingly talented people from New York. In the Bay Area and San Diego, like I think it's awesome they're coming here. This is you and I hear both sides of this discussion about all the people moving here, but I'm like, let's all this talent, but let's keep this culture that we have here. And really, if we with that the talent and the culture, it's a 1+1=11 potential
Yeah.
here in Austin.
Well, it's interesting because so many people, it's funny the amount of people I've heard who've made that similar type of calculation, like of just like we're going to look at all these different cities, and how many are moving to Austin for Austin. Like if you move to Silicon Valley, it's because I want to be in the tech industry and that startup. I
Yeah,
want to be in New York. There are different calls, but it's like Austin itself. And even wider when you think about Texas, it's kind of the same thing. We're moving here for here, which then creates a really interesting. I look at like the sector diversity that we have, because no one's like, well, I'm going to come here for this, I'm going to come here for that, I'm going to come here for this, and then all of a sudden you're like, oh wow, we've got a really amazing defense tech, hard tech space. Oh, my area of interest always in biohealth is like all of a sudden I came thinking it was small and tiny, but we wanted to move to Austin. And then I kind of looked around. I'm like, oh, there's a whole lot of interesting people here and growing. It's all growing very quietly. And so I think you've had kind of that 30-year growth trajectory in kind of the we'll call it, say, tech, innovation space that Austin has kind of almost set the groundwork for, right? And then you had this sudden new wave that happened in 2020 in kind of the post-COVID. That's when I moved here. So it's all me, really. But like kind of its own, it's kind of this next level, right? Because what was happening, I think, before is individuals were moving, right? Like this person was moving that person
yeah,
that as an individual and a talent wouldn't necessarily move the needle. And I think what's happened, kind of call it 2018 to 2023, 2022, is suddenly you had people who individually, could move the needle, right? As Samuel from Live Players always put, like it's a live player, right? You had Elon, you had Jim
yeah,
Breyer, you had Gurley, you had Lonsdale, like et cetera. Like these people could actually
yeah.
individually make huge moves. So now I think the narrative is changing, and that we are at a level that it's like, oh well, maybe I should go do this, maybe I should go do that, and then you had. And it's kind of like this. We're now entering that kind of almost that next phase now. Now people are like, well, maybe I want to go to Austin for defense tech or for bio and health or for advanced manufacturing. Like it's not just I want to go to Austin for Austin, and I want to go for this particular vertical set because I know it's amazing.
Wow, that was really, man, that was really good. Yes, I
I get
hadn't
like one
put
a
it all
year.
together. Like, no, I mean, because I oftentimes say, like, I say the Hollywood. Where's your Hollywood, right? In
Mm-hmm.
politics, your Hollywood is DC. If you're, in finance largely and law and the arts, it's like New York City. That's your Hollywood. And if you're making movies, well, Hollywood is your Hollywood. And like you said, in AI and in big tech still, and for VC, your Hollywood is the Bay Area. And I hadn't thought this is Austin. Like I'm not even using that word. Like you come here because there's no Hollywood here. This is you come here for this culture, for this experience, for this quality of life, for this community. And but I do think when you can say I'm Austin, and like now I say about Capital Factory, it's always been center of gravity for entrepreneurship in Central Texas. this is true, and you've seen it. It is a center of gravity for national security innovation for the country. Like literally, Austin, Texas now is a key node. And so, if you are a dual use defense tech, gov tech company, like you have a seriously compelling reason to be here in Austin, Texas,
Well,
because your voice, your company will be amplified through its presence here.
no, and it's funny you mentioned that because I remember seeing this. It was somebody, put this out on Twitter X, and it was trying to attract defense tech companies to Florida. It's like this, but the line was something along the lines of, "You don't have to move to just Austin or the Gundo. There are other places." Like, so when we've all of a sudden been
Yeah.
like, "Okay, here are the two primary spots," and I'm going to pitch why you should go somewhere else. You know that a narrative has changed.
Yeah, it's really like if we were to rewind 10 years and think about how the space has become so active in defense. And I give so much credit to Josh Baer. I mean, I've been gripped hands with him and Joseph Kopser and several others, Paul Norwood, Kevin Landshuk, in trying to bring defense here. But it is, even though so at Capital Factory, I've been their lead military advisor for 8 years. This is so 8 years ago, Josh is like, I need someone who can speak that language because I'm starting to get visitors from DC and the Pentagon. And I said, sure. So it was literally called the Director of Military and Veteran Affairs as a volunteer gig. Like someone from the Air Force would come. Then 2 months later, someone from NGA, National Geospatial Intelligence Agency, would come. Then FBI. And then it was coming. It was so DIU first was here, DIUX, Defense Innovation Unit, experimentation back in the day. And then it just became, and then it was like a flywheel. More, I'm like, Josh, this is becoming like a full-time job. You're gonna need to hire somebody. And it's hit the point. Like I'm in DC a lot, the family there and business. And the joke in DC is if I want to have a meeting with my defense colleagues, I host it in Austin. Everybody will show up. And it is special. Like, and when I say it's become the center of gravity, especially with national security, it's like, okay, so we all have this patriotic, you know, let's defeat China. Let's defeat our major adversaries and maintain freedom. So everyone likes the idea of doing work to serve the nation. And then you do it in Austin, Texas, where you are open networks and a culture of help and barbecue and tequila and live music. And so it's like it's powering advances in dual use and defense tech because people enjoy working with one another in a place. It's like we're getting further with with defense tech and so forth
Yeah, one of
by
the other.
virtue of working together in Austin, Texas. I mean, it's just true.
It's funny you say the Tila live music. So one of the other superpowers that I've identified is, I call it "We Are Cool."
Like
It's
that. Yes.
it's F1, it's ACL, it's the barbecue, it's the restaurant, it's all that stuff. Yeah, it's because there's an attraction here. It was also on that note is I was just tweeting this out the other day. I never owned a Yeti before moving here. I think we're at 10. Like there's such an infusion of Austin into the brands, whether it be Tito's, whether it be Yeti, like so both on the perspective of being here and you live it, you breathe it. My kids love HEB and Buc-ee's, and I was like, I didn't know how you should love a grocery store, but like it's a thing, right? Like go, and we always have to stop at Buc-ee's whenever we go to San Antonio or Houston. And then it also infuses the same brand outside. We're literally exporting culture. So when people think about, when they're watching, obviously, Texas football, or they're drinking Tito's, or they have their Yeti, like, it's Austin. And there's so very few places. I'm sure people can point to other brands that are the same, but so not so many brands have such of that level that are still so core and connected to like the city that they came from.
Exactly. It's just that pride and ownership that we have, and pride in our city. And I think I really like the "We Are Cool" because I will talk to my friends in other cities, especially in DC, because I transition out of the military there. A lot of military veterans transition out, and then they usually will stay there, get a job working for a big defense prime or trying to do something to start up in defense. And I say, you can move to Austin. Like you're not, you don't have to be like where the army's like. And here's why. In a word, Austin is fun. Like people in DC, that this is like my big city, like picking on the big cities, but from DC, love it, love the people. But people don't go, man, you got to come to DC. It's so much fun. But it's true. Like I say, I think I'm gonna make cool like the third talking point. I say it's fun, it's community, and now I'll say it's cool. And I think it's yeah. So now and yet the other day I went to ChatGPT and I said list the sizes of metro areas because people will often say how big is Austin? How many people in
Right.
Austin? I'm usually like in the city about 1 million, but that's not a good way in my mind to like size because it's always it's the whole thing. And so I obviously New York, boom, like 30 plus million. Austin was 27
Yep.
metro areas, and actually I felt like humbled for a moment, and yet happy at the same time because sometimes we are so proud and we brag about the city the way we are now, but we're still small. And so when I describe it, I'll do it with my Yeti. I'll do it with my Yeti here. Um, I say Austin sort of just fits right in your hand, like in the palm of your hand. It's not too big and it's not too small. It just sort of like
It has both. It has that wonderful the small town feel and that
yeah.
connection, right? Because you have those people who know so and so. I remember there was some early times when I was realizing. I mean, I always describe um, ecosystems as an onion, right? And you kind of have the
Mm,
different layers. You meet different people down, and
hmm
the the center is what is whatever the influence, power, whatever kind of you want to put in the center, and that fits a lot of places. And then I go to I was in San Diego. Like when I started investing, I suddenly met a whole bunch of people. I'm like, I've been here for like 12 years at this point. Who are you? Where have you all been? Right? Like I never connected with that. Versus here, the onion model doesn't work. One, I think for two different reasons. One, you have those kind of long term connections because I remember it was kind of around the same time we talked about that same the post that Joseph did, but it's like you had people who were connected and like you is very, very different in terms of like level of the onion, but you guys seem to know each other. And it's partially because if you've been around for 20 years, this person wasn't the big wig at that point, right? And you have that's still that kind of small town connectivity. And I think the other side is that you have, and a friend had said this to me. It was like Austin is changing so much that the onion it has to settle. Right? You can have that in New York City. You can have it, but like where you have those kind of tiers settle and you have it go down. Versus, I mean, every time we have a new wave of people coming in, it 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 disrupts the order. But that's not a bad thing. I mean, how long Michael Dell was the richest, most powerful, influential, whatever word you want to use for I don't know 20 plus, maybe more years, and
Yeah.
then Elon moved to town. But I think the openness, and I'm going to take a guess on this, but I don't know for sure. I bet you that Michael was one of the people trying to convince Elon to move here.
That is a great point. I'm sure that I, the question is, how do we take I think we have the opportunity, take all of our best practices from around, and it's like, we don't want to be what happened in SF. We don't want the crime of New York experience. It's like, how do we get it right here? I feel like we have the potential we can do it. I mean, when I see things like what's happening with the Waterloo and the
Mm-hmm.
expansive project of the Waterloo, I'm thinking, okay, there's a lot of cranes, but if you zoom in or you drone over that part of the city, you see there's a lot of green happening there. And it's like, how do we as a community with all these talented people grip hands, work as one team, and really optimize Austin? And can we do it in a way in a time of political vitriol and division? I think we can. In the sense of what I was going to show you real quick when it comes to the community, like, so I live in Rollingwood, and a decade ago, couple of the gentlemen here started what they called the Roller Win Gentlemen's Club, which is, a little play on the men's club. And there are about 30,
Sometimes
30 of
gentleman's
us at the
club
time.
means a whole other thing, but yes.
Exactly,
I
exactly.
think
I
my
know.
wife would get
We
pissed if I'm
it
like, I'm
adds
going to
some
go to the
humor. I
Rolling Wood
know.
Gentlemen's Club. She's like,
Right.
what?
It's not a place, but it's part of the humor. And I said, look, I'm going to throw everybody into WhatsApp. And so they're like, all right, whatever. Now, and I can show you this. Maybe you see this. 186 men. And even this morning I got, oh, we got to add Jason. He just moved in on like Timberline. And so, across the city and in this neighborhood, like it's such an active community. And like, if you say, I need, like, does anyone have a pair of AirPods? Like mine just went out. I'm about to do a podcast, and like 10 guys say, yeah, come by. I'll drop them. I'll put them on my front porch. And I don't know. I guess maybe I'll stop on the Austin Love Fest, but I guess what I'll say, bringing it back to VC a little bit, all of our dual use investments, I say you must be a capital factor company. They're like, but Craig, I'm in LA. I'm in the Gundo. I'm like, I know where you are, but you're going to get such massive value out of being a capital factory company of Austin, Texas. Just hit the I believe in Craig button, because I've been around that ecosystem for 8 years, and I've seen it happen time and time and time again. And so they all do, and then they all come here, and then they meet a customer, or they get a contract, or like they have the serendipity on the 8th or 16th floor of Capital Factory. So it's more than just, there's some there with the city, aside from all of the goodness and love. Um, Last thing I'll say is, when I go to other cities and I hear a horn, I'm like, what's that noise? Like, people don't honk here. And but at least you rarely ever hear anybody honk.
Yeah.
They must have just moved here if they're
You have,
honking.
you have, yeah, you have to learn the new, the new way of waiting. It's called patience. Unless you really
Yeah.
deserve the honk. Well, it's funny that you bring up the Gundo. So I did a whole episode on the Gundo,
Yeah.
thinking about, partially was about like, what can we learn from the fact that they went so narratively so viral, and that was pretty amazing what they'd kind of done the last year. And then also, there's such it's back to like the first principles. The Gundo is something, and I love that they went with it's not Silicon Gundo or anything like that. It's they have their own identity, they have their own feel, and it does
Yeah.
it is something different, and there is that uniqueness, and I think that's great. I'm really rooting for them. And I know that you guys are split between LA and Austin. So from that split, what do you see as the differences between those two ecosystems? And is there a deal that you guys are in Austin that like says, yes, this is an Austin company, and like this is an LA or Gundo company, and they do look, feel, sense differently by nature of where they came from?
It's interesting that I do see the communities like so almost as like one community in two different places.
Mm.
And I know that can almost sound striking, like, dude, Texas, California, really? One community. But from a tech perspective, what I find culturally alike is the excitement about the technology, and it seems to be excitement over competition. And I think this is where you get to earlier comments about, like, if I'm going to try to introduce the Bay Area in here, highly competitive, more sharp elbowing culturally, but yet then they would say, you're welcome for all the unicorns, you're welcome. Like, that level of competition is what gets us to perform at the next level. But in LA and in Austin, I think, certainly, like, let's go back to Hollywood for space out in the Gundo, but it's more than that, right? It's more than space. And it does feel there's a level of collaboration there and a level of collaboration here that I think are very simpatico between the city. And we have a lot of Californians are moving here. So our space companies, Outpost Space, returning satellites from space, Proteus Space, which is designing satellites in minutes, like 1,000x faster than currently. Those do feel like, okay, those are Gundo, even though Santa Monica and downtown LA, but that's the culture there. Not that we can't have great, they couldn't be here because they could, but I do feel more space coming to Texas, but it's still like over indexed in LA. I don't know. Like if I think about a company like really.com and Adam Lyons, who was the founder
Hmm.
of Zebra, and then he's like, okay, this is great, Zebra, great. But then he was like really trying to find what can I do? Probably more on the important side. Not that insurance isn't important because it's dollars and cents for families and the insurance itself. But he's, now he's doing really.com and doing this DY network to for privacy, right? Really.com on the privacy side. And it also provides a financial incentive for those who put the cell in their house or on the roof and that's, I mean, I don't know, that feels Austin. Like Adam had such a great brand, great run. And yet I need to do something more important. I'm going to do it again. And here I go with
Mission driven
really.com as a
companies
startup.
does feel
Yeah.
like an Austin thing, and this isn't
Yeah.
like, you know, social and like we're gonna do, that kind of, but really like we're gonna change, back to the moonshot, the 10x, we're gonna change the nature of humanity by doing this kind of thing, whether it be, I mean, I think Icon for me always kind of like really screams that, right? It's a very
Mm.
very obviously tech oriented company, but it's like we're going to solve housing. Like that's the mission. And in some cases, then you think about like SpaceX moving here, like we're going to Mars and going to make it like those broad mission statements. Again, nothing against enterprise SaaS companies, but it's just
Yeah.
that's a different feel. And when I've looked at venture funding in Austin, you see those, the categories that sort of fit those are growing and becoming a much more, bigger slice of the pie, even as we grow, the pie is getting bigger as well.
Yeah. I think we're still a startup. That's what I tell people. I'm like, Austin, for all its growth and popularity, and now that I did the Chat GPT 27th biggest metric, we're still a startup. And people will, in as much as someone can listen to this podcast from the West Coast and say, yeah, but guess where are you going for your Series A, B, and C funding? I'm like, California. Okay, we're coming to you. I mean, we're getting more here. We're getting more and more and more funds here. And it's happening, but
I'd push back on the
w-
A. I think B and C
yeah,
we don't have
yeah,
quite the capital. There's a kind of a circle at least there, because we also don't have as many companies that are needing the B and C on that constant basis. But I think as we
yes,
grow, but the amount of new funds or funds that have moved here that play in that A space, I think actually that's probably our strongest. It's our, late stage and seed where I think there's some gaps.
yeah, that's a fair point. I mean, I was sort of doing a direct comparison probably, but I
Yeah.
think, but relatively, you're right. It's you can do an A here.
Yeah. I mean, the Valley is it's
Sure.
it's its own beast, right? And that's one of the reasons I was like, you want to be something new, want to be something different. Just like the Valley wasn't like, well, New York's the center of the universe, or Detroit was the big center of innovation, so we're going to be, the Silicon Apple, or instead of like Big Motor City, like big Silicon City, right? They were own thing, and so it's the same thing. That's one of the reasons I hate Silicon Hills. I can't stand that term.
Yeah, I don't use it at all. If I see it, I know what it's trying to say. But I agree.
I do want to.
We are Austin. We are cool.
Yeah, no, I think not having a buzzword is a good thing. So I've always kind of thrown out there. No one's given one that I've ever kind of felt, but like if we could replace Silicon Hills with something besides Austin, I think that would be,
Yeah, yeah,
names are fun, narratives are fun.
yeah,
Like
yeah.
there's a
It's. I just want to. We got to get it right. I think you're right. Like I often think about Nashville, and Nashville trying to grow said, put up the banner. We are the bachelorette capital of the world. And I don't know if you've been in Nashville lately, but if you go on a weekend, it
I
is
I've been once in the last
madness.
couple of years, and it was on a weekend,
Oh
and I was
my
like,
gosh.
okay,
So to me, that's a lesson in be careful what you ask for. Now they may love it, but I mean, if you're it's just madness. And so whatever we do, whatever we say, we want to be thoughtful because I think the live music capital of the world is a good one.
It's also in some
too.
ways got to be organic. I mean,
Yeah.
it's one of those things that someone's going to say it, whatever it is, and everyone's be like, "Of course, like that should have been it for the last 20 years. Why wouldn't we use that?"
One comment about LA and Austin is I read a few years ago that kids who grow up in warm weather climates are happier as adults in their lifetime, and that fewer mental health problems everywhere. But just generally, the happiness measure. And I read that, I'm like, oh, okay, that almost it feels like a Captain Obvious, like Captain Obvious like statement. But I do think there's truth to it, and I think when you have LA and Austin, and we're able to be out and be together, like these things, and that does contribute versus Boston, DC, New York, where you do need to hunker in the wintertime. You're not, you know, everyone needs to stay warm and inside. And so it's all these things. And I think this is what, back to the Mithril, Mithril saw this. It was part of the algorithm, not close for hurricanes. We're a little toasty in the summer. We can't deny that, but we're not getting a lot of the weather events and
I never
all these
understood the
other things.
concept of summering until I was here. I was
Oh
like,
my
"Oh, this is
gosh,
why
I know.
everybody leaves."
Yeah. Yeah. This is where it's like, okay, for all the goodness that we've discussed about Austin, it's freaking hot in the summer. And we are like, okay, where do I go? Where can I, Colorado, here I come.
Yeah, that's it. Colorado,
Manhattan Beach,
Wyoming, like those
somewhere,
seems to be
San
the big spots.
Francisco, New Hampshire, Maine, you got it. I validate that that's a better place to be in the sun.
So I want to kind of, as we're kind of heading towards time here, I think it's a great combination of open to help and fun. But like the reason we connected is you're participating in Austin's Dancing with the Stars event, which first off, yeah, that you couldn't pay me to to do like that. So like, yeah, you're a braver man than I in that. So you want to tell me a little bit about the event? And I know it's obviously for a good cause and how
Yeah,
you're able to get in front and do
it is a
ballroom dancing.
great fun event once a year. Dancing with the Stars, Austin, and it's to benefit the Center for Child Protection. And I think I think has sustained such momentum because if you become familiar with the mission, which is in protecting children who have experienced physical abuse or sexual abuse or witnessed a crime, they welcome these children in 3 to 5 a day, three to
Oh my
five a
God.
day, and then it's like I'm air quoting here, like the most incredible warm hug. They help settle the trauma, manage the trauma, put them in a safe place, and they bring all the. It's a nonprofit, but they bring all of like the federal, local, state agencies to the center, and then that's where they help manage the crisis, in the crime, and so it's like you see the videos, and it's just like
Oh God.
it's
And
it, it's awesome. So I think they're on to something that's they've really put together. Like if you think about it, like a startup almost, like how
mhm.
what they do is they ask people like myself to dance, and then for a good cause, and then I invite all my friends, watch me make a fool of myself on out there on the dance floor, and it's a great formula because we all go. So I tell people in Austin I've become like a professional gala player. Like not
Mhm.
I'm not a National Football League or Major League, but I am like a pro gala person. Tuxedo full time. I actually have two tuxedos.
Oh boy.
That's what it takes here. So, but there's certain events, certain causes that really stand out, and this is one of them. So I'm going to be doing some hip hop dancing December 7th.
Oh
I'm
wow.
happy. My wife has done this. Good friends like Heidi Smith and George Scott here in the neighborhood have done. I've seen it and experienced it. It's a great event. And so this year, what enabled it, the unlock this year is I usually go to the Army Navy football game, and it's usually that same weekend. But this year, the Army Navy is a week later. And they said, Craig, what do you think? I'm like, I'll do it. But I did have one condition. I said, I'll do it, but only if I can break dance. So run that up the flagpole through Glenn, who's the master dance he's the guy, and he approved. So there'll be a little bit of that.
Oh, that sounds fantastic, and I feel like I would break.
Sounds fantastic. I hope it looks fantastic, but
But in all,
uh,
all honesty, if it looks fantastic or doesn't look fantastic, it's still going to be a win for everybody. We
that's
can all look at the Australian woman breakdancer and what that became,
exactly.
and that was not
So
fantastic.
that was not. So I won't do that. It'd be just enough. I'm trying to get back to my eighth grade days, and I did a video. I held up my parachute pants from eighth grade, like 27 waist. Anyway, you might see me. You might see me in parachute pants.
Oh,
Maybe.
that's
Yeah.
the tease.
Erase that image already. Like
Yeah.
erase that image.
Well, that's the tease. It's going to everybody going to show up now. It's going to be overwhelming. Craig, this has been so much fun. I always like
Thanks,
to end with the
Jason.
same question: what's next, Austin?
Mm. Man, I feel like I want to flip that on you. I think I don't know if it's a statement or it's a question. We get bigger and smaller at the same time, right? How do we get we're getting bigger. It's happening. We are a growth company. And I say to people, do you want to work in a company that's flatlined, or do you want one that's growing and, new opportunities for all of us? All of it's happening in like from even public transportation, the fact that we're growing up with public transportation and the restaurant scene, the music scene, the comedy scene, but how do we keep it a small town? So I think we can do it. And maybe just by talking about it a lot. And I think about Matthew McConaughey, no matter where anybody falls on him, though most generally like him, but he's like, come here, but help us maintain this culture. Don't try to change it. Help us maintain it. So I don't know. That wasn't a good answer. I should have
It
said
was from the
a
heart,
space
though. I
station,
think that's
a
what
space
makes it
station
answer.
up by F1, launching, rocket ships up behind F1. But we know we have something special here, super special. The secret's out, but we're still a startup, and we have to make the right pivots.
No, I think it's perfect. Any time someone answers this question from the heart, I think is always the best answers that we get. So, Craig, thank you so much for joining the podcast.
Thanks, Jason. This was a ton of fun. I learned a lot from you, man. That you've been doing this for so long, and really helpful for me to think about the city even differently, in a good way, differently, but with new words and new perspectives. So thanks for what you're doing to keep Boston big, small, weird, live music capital, like all the things. Thank you.
So what's next, Austin? We're glad you've joined us on this journey. Please subscribe at your favorite podcast catcher, leave us a review, and let your colleagues know about us. This will help us grow the podcast and continue bringing you unique interviews and insights. Thanks again for listening, and see you soon.